Hello and how's it going? Welcome to Doing Something, and in this video, I will be sharing my experience in paving this section in my backyard. This area tends to flood during the rainy season, and I managed to get this done before the season arrived. This was a rather interesting project because I used a different method of approach to see if it would be better than using the PVC method. So one thing that's kind of obvious to some people is that concrete is a very hard surface depending on the thickness. Fortunately, the 4 feet by 6 feet by maybe 1 to 2 inches of concrete wasn't too bad. However, I had to destroy some 4-inch concrete on the side to essentially clear up for the last column. This was all done with a 8-pound sledgehammer. It was exhausting work, but at least I got to work out my arms. I decided to save some money by producing my own materials by smashing the rocks to specific sizes for the bedding. This was very time consuming as it took me roughly 3 weeks to complete, including making a shifter to separate the sizes. This short clip was a quick update on my progress, and as you can see, some of the rocks were separated, and in this clip, I was smashing rocks as a demonstration in my hard labor. I believe the concept of utilizing different sized rocks is to create a good bedding for pavers to rest upon, locking in the pavers and preventing water from accumulating to the surface of the pavers. Normally people use gravel and sand, but I decided to replace sand with smaller rocks because the sizes that I was making are rather inconsistent, so I basically had to work with what I have. After a good endurance workout, I separated more rocks and began leveling the ground by raking, watering, and compacting the ground. At this point, I made sure that the dirt level is at a slope away from the house, so the water doesn't mess with the house foundation. I also decided to add a dry well because this will help drain excess water deeper underground. This essentially helps replenish groundwater as most surfaces are made with concrete, which doesn't allow rainwater to infiltrate back underground. I installed this at the low end, 3 pavers from the edge as you can see here. I didn't really think thoroughly in where to install this. I kinda just did it. The depth of the well is dependent on you. For me, I decided to go for about 3 feet. As for the pipe itself, I use this pipe that I found in my yard. It's been sitting there for years, and I'm not even sure if it's proper for this type of job, but it has some holes in it, so I'll just use it. Even if it's not for this type of job, it is rigid enough to prevent the hole from collapsing over time. Now that crushing rocks and ground leveling is essentially over, it's pretty much time to add the bedding. At this point, I don't know what I was thinking. So normally to have a perfectly level paved flooring, a half-inch PVC pipe is used to help gauge the level when you start adding the bedding. But for some reason, I did the complete opposite, and I made things more complicated. I made 4 of these guiding sticks that I placed at each corner. It has markings on it to tell me where the level of the beddings are at, and I'll tell you right now, it did nothing. And to make things worse, I didn't crush enough stones, which made leveling pretty difficult. In the end, I pretty much had to spend more time crushing rocks. It didn't look too bad. I had to improvise some areas, but overall, it came out pretty good. Decent, I say. For the pattern, I chose simple columns with alternating colors of gray and red. Keep in mind, this is not how you're supposed to be paving. This was my mistake in making this too complicated. Also, like I said before, I didn't crush enough rocks for the specific sizes, so I had to level and re-level each paver I placed. I did use a 4-foot leveler to help me keep the pavers leveled, so majority of the area is relatively leveled. You may have noticed that I've placed thin pieces of boards or wood between the pavers. The purpose of them being there is to create large gaps between the pavers to allow water to flow with ease. Once I finished placing the pavers, I filled in the gaps with crushed rocks, but for the time being, they were just placeholders. The last column of pavers were a little bit of a troublesome as almost each one is a different size, so I had to essentially use an angle grinder to cut them down to their respective sizes. Since I was working on this project alone, I had to figure a way out to control the amount of dust produced when cutting the pavers. I filled up a concrete mix tub with water, but I soon learned that it wasn't just the amount of water needed. After some troubleshooting, I found a method to minimize the amount of dust into the air by adding more water to a point where it was barely over the paver itself, and had to approach the angle grinder at an angle where the dust was pushing into the water instead of the air, just like so. Once the cut was made, I broke off the piece by using a hammer and completed the last column. Waited a few months later, and we had heavy rainstorms that lasted 2 days, which was perfect to test out the new paved area. There was no flooding, which was amazing. I didn't do a terrible job per se. The drywall is doing wonders by allowing water to infiltrate deeper underground. Overall, I'll say that this was a successful project. The lessons that I learned from this project is that the PVC method should always be used. With solid guidance, it makes leveling very easy and less of a hassle. Also, it's never a bad thing to have excess materials for a project, as this can save time, especially when you're making your own materials. I hope you learned something new and enjoyed this video. Until next time, take care.